My parents and I lived in Kiev, Ukraine. My father worked as an engineer, and that's where I started going to school. But every summer, I would spend time with my mother's parents. They lived in the countryside in Voznesensk, and they were farmers. Just a small plot of land, but enough to where they can go to the farmer's market and sell vegetables and fruits. So I'd spend my summers with them, go with them to the farmer's market. And I had really fond memories of them, and this picture is with me with them in Voznesensk. They were good people, hardworking people, and enjoyed my summers with them tremendously, just being on the farm, eating cherries, living in the countryside and walking in the forests, sometimes jumping into the river, and it was really a nice way to spend the summers over there. I started school in Kiev. The school was actually fairly close to where our apartment was. Only went there for a short time before we actually moved. My father was an engineer. He had a master's degree in engineering. And my mother also had a job at that point in time. When she came to the United States, she went back to school and became a nurse, but that was not her profession in the Ukraine. And my parents vaguely had some distant relatives that lived in the United States. At that point in time, there was no internet, there was no real television about what life was like in the United States, but people heard rumors that it was a better life. And so, although we had a good life in Kiev, times were difficult. You couldn't buy a car if you wanted to. There was a long wait list. You'd have to walk to the grocery store, and you couldn't find many items that you wanted to. Perhaps if you knew the butcher very well, you might be able to get some good cuts of meat. But basically, it was not the easiest of times by American standards, at least. And then there was the whole history of living in the Ukraine. Both my grandparents, my grandfathers were in World War II, and my grandfather on my mother's side came back to after the war, and at that point in time, Stalin started taking a lot of properties away from people. So my family on my mother's side had always been farmers, but their farms were taken away for the most part. And some of my relatives were put in jail because that was the easiest way to take their property. And of course, my family is Jewish, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism. My parents tell me that the paperwork they had, sort of like the driver's licenses that they have in America, would actually say Jewish on it, so people would instantly realize that that was your faith and treat you accordingly. And so my parents wanted to leave the USSR and go to America, where they heard life was much better. And I can't understand how brave they were at that point in time, because now everything is connected. You hear about what life is like in other countries. You can go online and understand what people are doing and what kind of job opportunities may be there. Back then, there were no such things. You had no television that talked about the outside world. In fact, it pinpointed how the bad things were in America, but not the good things. You couldn't listen to the radio and understand how things were in other countries, and of course, certainly no internet. And so it was really a leap of faith. They packed up their bags and they came without knowing what life would be like, came without really understanding what their futures would entail, just knowing that it was an opportunity and a better opportunity than they had over there. Their dream was always to have a house and have a car and have those things that I think many people in America kind of take it for granted. And so they worked and were able to get that. And out of really all the people that I've met in America, they're certainly some of the biggest fans of America, because they know what it's like to live in hard times, and also what it's like to be here and be able to succeed. We weren't able to go back for quite a while until the USSR split up, and that was certainly difficult for my family. But once they did, I went back to the Ukraine every 2 or 3 years with my family, and separately they'd go visit their relatives by themselves. And it was an interesting time. The Kiev had changed quite a bit in that period of time. The grocery store started having more fruits and things like that as the country opened up and capitalism sort of opened the markets up for them. Visiting my grandparents was certainly a wonderful time to reconnect. I remember taking a camera with us and sitting in their porch and talking with them and filming it. That was quite something. Living over there, especially in the countryside, is so different than living in Kiev or anywhere else. They still had a bathtub where you'd have to boil water, and every day if you wanted to take a shower or a bath, you would have to boil water and use that. The walls in their house was very thick to keep the heat in the wintertime and the cool in the summertime. So some of those memories you forget until you go back and reconnect and look at that. So that was really wonderful. And then my grandfather on my father's side had passed away, but my grandmother was still there, and so we were able to visit her in Kiev. And they both lived into good old age, into their 90s. So we did get a chance to reconnect, but not for quite some time. My parents wanted me to really immerse myself in the culture and fit in and make good grades, and to do that they really focused me on speaking English as much as possible, watching American TV. And looking back on it, I wish I had gone to a Russian school or kept up my Russian better. I think that's the difficulty with a lot of immigrants here, is we try to assimilate and become more American, but in some ways we lose our culture and our traditions. And still to this day I celebrate Old New Year here in Portland. There's a band called Chervona that plays, I believe it's in the Star Theater. So I invite friends over and I make a Russian meal, and then we go and listen to Chervona play at the Star Theater. It's not quite my tradition growing up, but it's still something that connects me to the community, and I think that's very important. Yeah, it's hard to describe. It feels in some ways like home. You see people that dress in the way you remember, the authentic clothing. I still have my grandfather's shirt with all the embroidery on it. From when he was young, and it actually fits me pretty well. But nonetheless, hearing the music, listening to people talk, eating shashliki, it really feels comfortable in a way. And I went there with my girlfriend, who's American, and it's sort of nice to introduce people to that culture.